Hey and welcome everyone, it's Egwin here from Beyond Systems, and today we have a special guest on here, my very good friend John Kempf from KempfFitnessProfessional. So he is a specialist in all things nutrition, personal development, movement, the connection of consciousness, mind, body, and really like how you can implement that in your regular day life in a very, very simple and applicable way. And for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, you know, I most of the time talk about either movement or how the mind and the body are correlating with each other, how consciousness comes into play. But I rarely talk about nutrition. And that's simply for the reason I have studied a little bit in that direction, but mainly for personal use. And this is why I decided to bring in a specialist who is really just as much a freak in nutrition and like literally how you cook things, what you can cook, how you can use this to heal yourself, as a specialist and also a geek in all movement departments. And so that is why I have John on here today. And we'll just browse through the topic of nutrition in general. Like there is so much out there right now. There are so many different types of diet out there, so many different trains of thoughts when it comes to you have to do this, you have to live by this rule, you have to eat that in order to achieve certain either fitness goals, personal development goals, losing weight goals, or whatever it might be. And one of the things that I love about John is, apart from a very deep scientific knowledge, he's also always on looking to improve whatever he's doing through his own experience as well. And he also developed a very specific view on nutrition that goes along with a Beyond Systems idea quite nicely, because he's not dogmatic in what he's doing. But that's as much as I'm gonna say in introducing him. John, a wonderful pleasure to have you here. It's always so good to talk and see you. Talk to you and see you. And yeah, just say a couple of words, say hello to the audience. And I'm really looking forward to this talk today.
Thanks, buddy. Well, I've been stoked this whole week coming on because I know how good this combo is going to be with you and me. And I appreciate you having me on your channel. And thank you to all the listeners out there that are tuning in. And I hope that I can either make you laugh or give you some morsels, no pun intended, that you guys can take with you and apply into your daily life, because that's ultimately the most important thing, is direct experience. If I just sit up here and blab and you guys can't take anything away, then what good am I really doing? And everything that I teach with my clients, I try to apply in my own personal life, like Egwin said. And that's why him and I get along so well, is because we can relate our personal experiences. And because we both have this never-ending desire to grow, then we're always looking for new nuances, new layers, and that's something too that we'll get into in the talk. But everything is always based on, you know, your reference point at that present moment, and there's layers to the game. It doesn't matter where you are, as long as we keep it simple and practical, and that's my goal for you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, like that sounds absolutely perfect. And like I said, it's 100% in line with everything that I do. Like you said, I mean, that's how we met, basically. Yeah. And you know how it is. Geeks immediately recognize themselves and their fellows. So yeah, absolutely. Well, I think let's get started by giving the audience a quick overview of your specific perspective when it comes to nutrition. Like I said, there are so many different ideas out there right now battling with each other. Like that seems to be the huge topic on this planet right now. Like, what is the one correct way to do something?
Mm.
And I mean, John is definitely going to talk about that, but like, he already said it, like the one perfect way to do something, it just doesn't exist. It's always like, okay, this is the science, maybe this is the idea of some person, but then the most important part in this equation is you individually. And what you bring to this equation really changes the game of everything. Your mindset, the way you approach it, what your specific needs are. And I think that would be a good starting point to jump in there and give the audience a good idea of what it could mean to approach something like nutrition in a much more free state of mind rather than a dogmatic, limited point of view.
This is going to be so good. I'm so excited. Yeah. So, I mean, premise, guys. I grew up in a classic standard American diet situation. We were low income, so it was often, you know, the stereotypical response of, oh, we can't afford to eat healthy. I grew up on corn dogs and Hot Pockets and, you know, freezer food that you toss in the microwave. And I just didn't really have any foundation of education on any of this stuff. And obviously it's not taught in our school system, which is an entirely different conversation. But the background that I had, as far as, you know, when people look at me as a nutrition specialist, I was no different than everybody else. I was, in fact, in a lot worse situation than most people with regards to my diet, simply because of the culture that I was influenced by. So I played sports, high contact sports, and I was a defensive end in football. And for anybody that knows football, American football, the linemen are the biggest, strongest guys. And so you want to be as heavy as possible, so that way you're harder to push around. And so I remember this clearly. We would go after football practice, go to McDonald's, and I would get 6 double cheeseburgers. And that would be like, oh, coach wants me to gain weight, you know, like that's just, this is how you gain weight. I mean, just ignorant, you know, I didn't know. And I just thought, oh, calories, that's all there is more calories means more weight gain. And so I was just the guy carrying around the gallon jug of water and just stuffing my face. And I just didn't have any concept of nutrient density or any, I didn't even know what a nutrient was. I just thought food, calories, you know, more calories in, I'll get bigger and stronger. And, you know, there's a little bit of merit to that, obviously, as far as thermogenesis goes. You need more energy coming in than you're burning to gain weight. And so it worked. And so that was enough for me to be like, oh, well, this is all there is to it. And then on top of that, I was very involved in alcohol, and not as much of the hard drug scene, but I mean, I was absolutely like the worst partier, one of the worst. Like I was known for being an absolute hooligan, and I just had no understanding of sleep, nutrition. I was just wrecking my body, and I had no idea. And thank God for athletics, because I had an outlet for emotional relief, but also it allowed me to physiologically at least circulate some of that shit out of my body as much as I could. Are we good with profanity? I'll try to keep it as good as I can.
All good.
Okay, cool.
As long as YouTube doesn't ban us, it's all good.
Okay. And so going into college, then, you know, playing semi-professional football, and then eventually I started bodybuilding. Well, prior to that transition to bodybuilding, I didn't even eat vegetables. And in fact, again, like I was like the extreme case. Like I was that D-bag guy that was like, vegetables, I don't eat vegetables, I'm not a wimp, you know. And so I was eating like graham crackers and Pop-Tarts to like post-workout, you know, and just no concept. And I never was lean. I never had the six-pack. I never was that cut guy, but I was strong. And so that was what I relied on, was like, okay, well, I'm never going to be lean. It must just be genetics, like everybody says. And then I would just eat food and lift heavy weights and try to get as big as possible. I was like, well, I seem to be good at this, so I'm just going to do that. And, you know, you get stuck in that static mindset. And then I went to college, and I stumbled upon the kinesiology major. I'll never forget. I was in the library, and there was just a one-page flyer that was, I was an undecided major at the time, and I was really like, this is dumb. Absolutely not worth my time. I had no interest or passion in any of the stuff like general education and history and stuff. I'm like, I don't care. Like, and I was just partying even more. And eventually I found this flyer for kinesiology, and it was like, learn about the human body in motion and movement and exercise physiology. I'm like, this major exists? What? I had no idea. Like, I was a first generation college student, literally clueless. Like, I came from a trailer park, guys. So I'm now like interested in exercise physiology. I start taking these classes, take a basic nutrients, like vitamins and minerals course. It was like introduction to nutrition. And that kind of sparked some interest, because I was like, oh, there's more layers to this, you know? And it's kind of that idea of competence where you've got at the top unconscious incompetence. You don't even know that you suck. You don't even know that you don't know. And that's where I was with the arrogance that I had. Yeah. And then I started taking these classes. I'm like, damn, this stuff is deep. And so that encouraged me to start putting some effort into the studies. And just like training and athletics, I started to actually put forth my potential towards, you know, the education that I was interested in. And of course, all the classes that I was interested in, I got good grades because I actually tried. And so that led me down this rabbit hole where eventually I hit this sticking point of not being able to progress as much as I wanted to in my physical journey of health and fitness and be strong and athletic. And I knew if I was going to be, which has always been a goal and a passion of mine, to be a leader in this industry of health and help others, because I grew up with poor health around me. And I know what that can do to people's minds and bodies and emotions. It's very devastating over the long term. And so I eventually reached this sticking point in the road where I knew enough that I was like, I got to start taking this nutrition thing seriously. And I made a decision. In fact, I might have it somewhere in this room. I made a decision to start taking nutrition seriously. I don't think I have the notebook in here, but I started journaling. That was right around the same time I started journaling. And I wanted to just highlight something that I think is so important, which you touched on right before I started, was that it has to be applied to you. And I love the quote, N=1. The subject is you. And so, yeah, the research is a good foundation and a starting point, but even in my own studies, and I saw this very strongly in the athletics and the physical strength training aspect, is you can read all the books you want, but if you don't go pick up that weight, you're never going to get strong, and you are never going to know what it actually feels like to move and develop yourself and distribute force in different ways. And it's just swinging the hammer on the anvil, you know, it's just practice, building mastery and competence. And so that is where I came to that crossroads with nutrition. I'm like, okay, am I going to walk the walk, or am I just going to keep talking the talk and reading these books and not actually applying it myself? And so May 6th, 2013, I said, I'm going to put the big point pants on and accept responsibility for my own life. And I'm going to start doing this healthy nutrition food thing. And I was as clueless as anybody. And I had no idea how to cook. I was in college. Like, I was living with 3 dudes in a house that, like, we were partying every weekend. Like, I had no concept. I was starting to wake up at this point to where I had a better understanding of, hey, I need to not be in the environment of people partying all the time if I want to actually get anything done with my life. And so then that kind of next step, once I had started to, you know, create a more optimal, conducive environment, then I started like, okay, I'm going to tackle this nutrition thing. And I just started like with what I knew, just basic. And in fact, at that point in time, I was inspired by a book that I read to try out a ketogenic diet, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I want to go over some of the different diet types. And it was just interesting because the book laid out a lot of really good research about hormones, which I had been studying in college, and, you know, learning about insulin and its relation to diabetes and obesity and how it affects freaking every other hormone. And so I started messing around with the ketogenic diet, N=1. I went from 12, I'm like Egwin said, I'm a super nerd. And I had one of my best friends at the time, Ramon Sedano, shout out, buddy. him and I did this at the same time. Actually, I started about a week and a half, 2 weeks before he did on this ketogenic diet. And it was intermittent fasting and the ketogenic diet together, which really, really increases insulin sensitivity and has a bunch of different positive benefits related to fat loss and overall balancing of the hormones. And so I was like, okay, this all makes sense in the book based on what I've read before. Now it's time to try it out. So I did skin fold caliper test, three site test, pecs, belly, middle of the thigh, 12.2% body fat. I was 204 pounds, something like that. And 205 pounds, I want to say, at 12.2% body fat. And 21 days later, I was 4.7%, again, measured by the same person, Ramon Serrano, who's given thousands of skin fold calipers, is one of the more accurate people I know that can give the test. And him and I both had been doing it with each other consistently anyway. And so that was when he was like, dude, you're leaner than me. I can't accept this. I need to start implementing what you're doing. I want to try this out myself, because it was just clear how incredible the results I got. But what I didn't realize at the time was it wasn't necessarily the ketogenic diet, because people are like, ooh, this thing outside of myself is going to fix all my problems. I was going in with more of a structured approach, but we'll talk about the ketogenic diet, the pros and the cons. But it was because I just stopped eating garbage. I actually started eating vegetables for like the first time in my life. And I started eating healthy fats. And I just actually started tracking, like, what gets measured gets results, guys. Remember that quote, because where you put your attention is where you're going to have the energy flow. That's where progress is going to go, is you're putting your conscious attention there. And so I was just like strength training. I would log my workouts. I just started logging my nutrition. And lo and behold, 21 days later, I had lost 16 pounds and gone from 205 to 189. And I'd never been that lean in my life. And I actually realized that genetically, I have really good abs. I have very good separation of my abs, and I'd never seen them before. So I was just like, oh, I just genetically, I don't have good abs. I got big, strong legs, but abs aren't my thing. And then 3 weeks, and I had a ripped six pack, and I was like, holy shit, this is freaking sweet. So that was really motivating for me, because I had all this muscle mass from this athletic development since I started lifting weights when I was like 14. So, 10 years later, now I'm actually lean enough to see all that muscle mass. And that was hugely motivating for me, because when I was younger, bodybuilding was a huge inspiration for me. Seeing these guys, that kind of superhero mentality, that Pumping Iron. Oh, great movie. If you haven't seen that, guys, go watch Pumping Iron. It's Arnold and all of his old school golden era bodybuilder buddies training for the Olympia. And it's incredible. The newer one, Pumping Iron 2, not as good. Generation Iron, I think it's called. But that always was in my mind of like the superhero. I wanted to be a leader. I was the captain of my football team. I liked to take on that role of responsibility and leadership and just hard work. That's all I knew how to do. I never have had an exceptional gift in any way that is, makes me different than anybody else. I just am willing to suffer. I'm willing to endure pain, because I have directly experienced that it builds resilience. It will make you stronger if you can maintain composure and endure the suffering, dare to push forward. So taking it back to the nutrition, I'm playing around, having these incredible results motivated me to then pursue pursue bodybuilding as a fun little hobby. So I started doing amateur bodybuilding shows. I started out with a physique show, and then did a couple bodybuilding shows. And that's its own story, which was a great experience, but not relevant to my true interests and passions. But I just love the design, the idea of building the body, really just growth in general, like Egwin and I talked about. And that was just an avenue that was familiar to me, because I understood how to create change in the physical vessel at that time. So I was like, holy moly, nutrition is a huge piece of this that I was lacking. And not only did I notice physiological change from an aesthetic perspective, but also from a cognitive perspective, which also anecdotally was noted by my buddy Ramon, who was doing this with me. Our reaction times increased when we started implementing high levels of healthy fats, especially saturated fat. So I just know it just was something that you can tell that N = 1 And journaling is such a critical component of any kind of experimentation you do, because you can go back and see those little things that you might have missed if you wouldn't have written it down, and 2 weeks later you would have forgotten it. And you're like, oh, that does, okay, yeah, that does make sense. And so I was noticing these cognitive changes, better memory retention, better reaction time, catching things before they would hit the ground, and just little things like that, lower levels of inflammation, just less sore from the workouts. And so that's where I really discovered the power of nutrition. And that set me on this quest from that point at 2013 to really about, I'd say 2018. And I tell this to all my clients, guys, it took me 5 years to figure this out. Granted, I was doing a lot of it on my own and just paving my own way, but I'm not a fast learner. Like, it took me a long time and a lot of failures, because it's not necessarily the actual understanding of what's not good and what's good for you. And good isn't the right word. Healthy and unhealthy, all ethics and morals are completely irrelevant to the physiological effect. But I was aware of how important this was, and how much it was affecting my life and changing me. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to dedicate myself to learning this craft of food consumption, which is not only learning how to cook, learning how to shop, learning how to meal prep, learning how to combine different foods to actually make it taste good, but it's also unlearning all those habits and conditions and patterns that you stack on over time that become just unconscious repetition over and over and over. You know, I just like, and this became very apparent to me with fasting, which is something I'll talk more about. But it's incredible how ingrained some of these habits are in our heads of like, well, you know, and especially when you're not at your center, emotionally swayed, I would turn to food. You know, I'm feeling up, feeling down, I would eat ice cream, or I love my ice cream. All you guys that know me, you know I love my ice cream. So it was a matter of 5 years of unlearning all the habits that I was not aware were affecting my health as much as they were, and then taking the time to build all these new skills related to, you know, sustaining myself, self-sustainability, which has gone from barely eating frozen vegetables in 2013 to now I have a garden, and I've got 4 garden beds where I've got chard the size of my torso, and collard greens and lettuce and kale. And so I'm growing my own greens and cooking those in meals. And so it takes a long time, guys. Don't think that like, oh, I'll never be able to get there. And, you know, when you see somebody that's like fit and ripped or they're cooking healthy food, and you're like, I don't even know, I can barely use my microwave. I just hit the add 30 seconds button. I don't even know what the other numbers on that microwave are. It's just a time game. And you have to be, you know, something that I wanted to tie back into this when we started about the separation, the black and white. Right before this on my YouTube channel, I was commenting on my 7-day dry fast video, and one of the people was like, yeah, everybody should do a 7-day dry fast and then 7 days off and 7 days on. And I said, hey, be careful with hard numbers and black and whites and yeses and nos, because one person's medicine is another person's poison. And if we put these strong frameworks of limitation around a subject, it usually turns people off. That it could have been their panacea, that it could have been the one thing, but they never actually went for it because of this self-imposed limitation someone else put on them. But also it takes away the fun out of it. It makes it too dogmatic and rigid. And if you're doing something for long-term life, like eating food that you do every single day, basically, then it's got to be enjoyable. And people are always like, what's the best diet? And the one that you enjoy, the one that you like. And that takes me to that concept of JERF, just eat real food.
Yeah, maybe just one tiny thing before we jump into the JERF concept, which is awesome, which I absolutely love. What's so funny about listening to your story again? Now, when I look back in my own life, I won't talk about it as detailed as you just did, because this really is your time right now. But just to give people an understanding of how different a story can sound, but still be very similar in the basic aspects that it shows. Like for me, I ate absolutely everything, vegetables and everything, up until the age of 5. Between the age of 5 and 18, I did not eat vegetables anymore. I ate rice, noodles, like pasta, pizza, but even the pizza without tomato sauce. Meat, high sugar content foods, sweets, iced tea, and all of this crap, literally. And it wrecked my body in a certain way. But the fun thing is, I tried to eat something else. Like my mother would try to put some carrots in my meal. Literally, I was almost going to vomit if I just saw a carrot in my meal. It just did not work for me. If you say, well, that's very unhealthy, hell yeah, it was extremely unhealthy. But looking back at it from a couple of years later, I realized that in that time frame between 5 and 18, I literally had to do it in order to survive on an energetic level. Because at that time, I was very sensitive energetically always, perceived a lot of things. And there were many things going on and many things developing in my personal and spiritual aspects that I was not able, A, to control, and B, to explain. And so I literally, looking back at it, I used nutrition to dull my senses down back then.
Yep.
And obviously I'm not doing this anymore. And for me, the way back to a healthy lifestyle was completely different, because when I was 18, I was quite different to you. I never did any partying or stuff like that. So after high school, normally in Europe, it's common that people go on a 1-week trip with all their classmates or stuff like that for partying. And I was the only one in my whole class, in my whole year, that did not smoke and that did not drink any alcohol. And so I was like, why would I go pay for a week watching my classmates wasting themselves? I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
And I told my parents, and I said, look, I want to do something different instead. So what I want to do is I'm gonna go to Thailand. And I was already in meditation and Qigong back then. And then I decided to do a 3.5-week detoxifying Taoist organ massage training in Thailand.
Oh.
And was with Mantak Chia in the Tao Garden in his training center back then.
Nice. I'm reading the Mantak Chia book right now.
And I knew that in this retreat center, they only serve vegetarian food, no meat, no pasta, nothing. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I mean, there are other people on that retreat as well. They survive on that. Yeah. Somehow I will make it. I will not die because I can't eat that stuff. So that was literally my mindset back then. And so I went there, and obviously it worked out. Yeah. And I started eating healthy stuff again. And then on the airport in Bangkok, from Chiang Mai back to Bangkok, and then Bangkok back to Vienna. And in Bangkok, I was really thirsty. And so I went to a soda machine and got, I think, a Fanta or something like that. And I remember that this as if it was yesterday. And I opened the can, I took a sip, and in the same movement, I threw it back in the bin. Because for a month, I did not have any sugar at all, like none, apart from sugar that's in like fruit sugar that you find in tropical fruits, but no white sugar, no artificial sweetening whatsoever, only water. Chlorophyll juice is what they called it. It literally looked as if they were simply mixing grass.
Rabbit pellets.
The water that stays back from cooking rice, and 15 different kinds of herbal tea. I didn't have anything else to drink for 4 weeks. And in my life, I always did things in an extreme way. And for me, that was the extreme reset that brought me back to eating more or less everything again, combined with having someone up in your intestines for 4 hours a day, massaging literally all the crap out that's stuck in there. And a week after coming back home, I got very, very sick.
Sure.
And normally I never go to the doctors, but I also know very good when it's time to do a checkup. So I went to the doctors, went to the hospital. They did some blood work. They heard I came back from the tropics. Honestly, I don't know how many ampoules of blood they drew. And the list they sent to the Tropical Institute in Austria to actually check the blood test, they did not choose. They simply crossed all points on the list. It took 2 days for that test to come back. The only thing they were able to find with all the tests they did in the hospital was that my inflammation parameter, which is the CRP parameter in the blood work, it's normal between 0 and 5, and I was up at 450.
Oh my God.
So inflammation in my body was through the roof. They already prepped a room for me, and I was like, nah, I'm not gonna go in this room. I'm gonna go home, and I'm gonna get well at home again. You can call me once you know whatever comes out from the blood works that you sent to the Tropical Institute. And they were like, yeah, and then maybe you should take this malaria standby medication and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, I mean, if you think it's absolutely necessary. The next day, I was even worse. I had even more fever, and I had blood in my stool, and it was really bad. Then I called the pharmacy, and they told me, yeah, that's a known side effect of the drug they gave you. And I was like, okay. I called the hospital, and I told them, look, guys, send me the blood work from the Tropical Institute. If you find anything, then I'm gonna come in, and otherwise I'm just gonna come back to the hospital in 2 weeks. You can draw blood again and confirm that I'm healthy, period. And then that's exactly what happened. All the tests they did in the Tropical Institute, every single thing came back negative. And looking at it from later on, I was like, I mean, of course, I stuffed things in my body that literally kill you slowly from the inside, but I have done so for 13 years. And that literally put so much toxins in my body that when I had this extreme time of 4 weeks, eating clean, drinking clean, sort of being forced to it because that was the only way to attend that massage course, that literally gave me a super boost in cleaning my body up again. And then it took me about another 3 years until my body was back in a healthy neutral. So that was also, it was a time then when I lived together with a couple of friends who were all geeks in the same direction: nutrition, Tai Chi, meditation, movement, fitness, whatever, personal development. And that was interesting because I became a vegetarian for the next almost 4 years. Didn't touch any meat at all. And only after that time That was when I was at university then. Only after that time, my body suddenly started to go back into what I would nowadays call a balanced diet, pretty much knowing what is healthy for me at what time. But before that, it was dogma. It was, okay, no, I want to stay healthy now, so I'm gonna eat this, I'm gonna eat that, I'm gonna eat this, I'm gonna eat that. So pretty much what you said about trying out those different systems. Mm-hmm. And so it's so funny. It's just, we have, like I said, very different story when we look at it in detail, but at the same time, it's extremely similar in the experiences we drew from it. Mm-hmm. And that is that nutrition has incredible effects on the body, and even the way of how to, quote unquote, snap out of something like that. For me personally, I do not know if I would have been capable of making that significant of a change without the massive impact of that retreat that I was on. And so, but that again is not the same for every person. Mm-hmm. Some people, they need to take it step by step, because otherwise they literally kill themselves. Mm-hmm. And some people, they're on the more extreme side when it comes to facilitating change, like you or me. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to throw that in there for people to see how different and yet similar what paths can be. And so, yeah, I cut you off when you were just jumping to your specific concept, which I so much love. So let's touch on to the JERF master over there.
I love that you brought that up too, because I see that as like so similar, even though different modalities, you know, alcohol and partying versus, you know, but I mean, it's the same concept, and it's something that really brings this back around to where we started. And I think what is so important right now, specifically in this time, unity and compassion. And it's not from a woo-woo perspective of like, kumbaya, let's all hold hands. Although I bet you if we did that around the world, things would be a lot better, a lot quicker. But the unity is in the fact that everybody struggles with this kind of stuff because it's not taught. It's not a foundation. Same thing with movement too. Like, I always consider movement as a language, and movement literacy, the ability to understand movement, is just something that we don't learn. And everybody knows nonverbal communication is like a huge way primates interact with each other, yet we're not taught how to do that. So it's the same with nutrition. And, you know, old systems continually evolving, structure that is in place for an intentional reason to keep people the way they are, you know, so they don't have the ability to educate themselves as easily as they could. But it still comes down to that fact that you have to have compassion for yourself first, but for everybody else too, to realize like, hey man, they're on their journey. They're trying. People usually are trying their best. You got to give them the credit for that. And so many people get discouraged, like, oh, I had that ice cream, I'm a bad person. They guilt and shame themselves. It's not bad. And like, if I want to have, you know, like a sweetie, I'll still go get one if I want, but it doesn't appeal to me anymore because I've reconditioned my brain. And it's not like I was dogmatic about it. I just started to slowly transition from processed food to real food. And I think, and I've seen this with all my clients that I work with, it simplifies the process and allows you more compassion for yourself of just, let's simplify. Like Einstein said, everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. The complexity is there, but if you don't actually understand it completely, then you're not really able to break it down simply. And that's why at the end of the day, there's a lot of research that I did on this. Once I started realizing, wow, nutrition is really a big factor here, that sparked me even more like, okay, I'm going to dive down this rabbit hole and do my own personal research. And so I started really going outside of the literature I was reading in school, which is super surface level, guys. Like even in college nutrition that you teach there, it's like, vitamin K has it's good for this, and these things have it in it. But it's like so disconnected from like real life, real living, real daily life of like, okay, well, how do I make that happen for me? And so I started going down this rabbit hole of reading, and I found this book. It was called The Evolution of Human Nutrition. And the first chapter was about epigenetics, which I'd never heard of at the time, but epi essentially meaning on top of the gene. And so the concept of epigenetics is the environment influences the expression of your genes, of your DNA. The information that comes in then changes the working of the system, and then that new system with that influence change expresses differently. I like the example, I always use this with my clients. If anybody knows the poker game Texas Hold'em, you get 2 cards in the beginning. That is like your genes. You get those cards, you're only going to be so tall, and you're going to have a certain color of hair. Your traits, those things are characteristics that you can't necessarily get away from. Those are part of who you are. But the 5 cards that get played in the middle of the table, those are the environment, those are the factors from the environment. Sunlight, sleep, water, exercise, nutrition, social influence, nature, all of these other variables that are constantly influencing how our genes express. And the kind of simple model was that it's like a light switch. Our genes are like light switches. The information comes in, and if it's a certain, you've got your healthy genes and your unhealthy genes per se, and certain information coming in will flip on the healthy genes and turn off the unhealthy genes, or vice versa. It's actually more, everything's on a spectrum. So it's more like a dimmer switch, where the amount of information coming in and the duration of that stimulus will affect how high or how low that dimmer switch is turned up or down. And so that concept, just like, it was a huge aha moment for me, because it's relative to everything, not just nutrition, but thoughts. And that's when I started to realize, oh, thoughts are things. Thoughts influence behavior. And so you have this information coming from the external environment that influences genetic expression, but you also have an internal environment, which includes your thoughts, also inflammation, hormones, immune system, the microbiome. There's a lot of stuff going inside the skin and inside the thoughts as well that are influencing the genes. So all of this like started to really make sense. And it was a new topic kind of in 2013 when I was reading about this, though Bruce Lipton, kind of coined for being the father of epigenetics. He was doing studies on this back in like, I want to say it was like 79 or something like that, where he was taking stem cells, and he would take 3 stem cells, all the same stem cell, and then he would do stimulus A, stimulus B, stimulus C. This one would turn into a muscle cell, this one would turn into a bone cell, this one would turn into a fat cell. And so that was just like right there. Yeah, environment influences the outcome, the expression of that cell. So the concept has evolved over time, and it's like really the interplay of all things. It's the dynamic relationship. I call it the dance. The dance with whatever word you want to use there.
Yeah,
God,
I love that.
infinity. But it's this constant interplay of like, if your partner steps forward, then you have to step back. So there's this interplay going on. So that then took me down the rabbit hole of, okay, so all of these different variables, nutrition for sure is a big one, exercise is a big one, sleep is a big one. I call that the 3 legs of the stool. You need those 3 to be optimal, to have optimal health. Then there's a lot of other influences there too: stress management, mindful living, social immersion, all that kind of stuff. But it just dawned on me like, oh wow, there's a lot of variables here that influence health. It's not just nutrition or fitness. And then that took me to the research of the blue zones. And for anybody that doesn't know, the blue zones are the areas that the name came from. Essentially, they were doing observational studies on different populations around the world. And it was, of course, synchronistic timing with everything. Like my senior year, when I actually started getting interested in nutrition and epigenetics, and started realizing that there was a metaphysical awakening that was happening for me, like end of 2012, December 2012, guys, January 2013, there was a light bulb that went off for me. And I started to become aware that I was aware. And it was really a reconnection of what I knew I had when I was a kid, but I shut it down with alcohol, and went through a lot of trauma that was necessary for me to be who I am today. But I was coming back to that awareness that I had when I was younger, and realizing that, oh, there's more to this game. And I'm starting, I could see like the little light peeking out the keyhole, and I was like, okay, I want more. I was getting more excited about this. And then I found the blue zones, and essentially in an anthropology class that I took senior year after I learned about epigenetics, it just happened to be, we were studying different tribes around Africa, and like one tribe ate predominantly a meat-based diet, 90% meat, and they would drink blood, and they were like super fit and healthy. And then you have over in Alaska and, you know, the Arctic regions, you have the Inuit population eating almost completely fat and organs. And they also were very healthy until the white man came in and did their good job there. But you go around the world and you see the Asian populations eating a lot of fish and rice. Central South American populations eating a lot of maize and corn and really high carbohydrate diet. So the blue zones essentially, which I'll tie into that idea that, well, people are eating a lot of different types of things, and there's healthy people and unhealthy people in all these different areas. So maybe there is more to it than just nutrition. And so the blue zones were these areas around the world. The observations showed that the people lived the longest. They were the highest rate of centenarians, people that would live over 100 years. And within these populations, there's one in California, Okinawa, Japan, and then there's like 5 or 6 or 7 other ones around the world. But essentially, they all had, like, a couple of them smoke. Another one was in Greece, I want to say, and they had the Mediterranean diet. But some would drink wine, some would smoke cigarettes, but they all had this concept of balance and enjoyment, really. And it's funny because there's interviews with these people that are centenarians. There's a really good documentary for any of you guys that are interested. It's called The Human Longevity Project, and it's incredible, really well done. It's like a 10-episode series that basically shows the science of all the stuff that I'm sharing now, along with them actually going to those populations and sitting down and interviewing the 119-year-old lady. And she's like, well, yeah, I mean, my whole youth, I walked 15 miles down to the town and 15 miles back every day, and that was normal. And I would drink wine and you know, and like one lady I saw, like, what's your secret? She was like 111 or 109 or something. She goes, whiskey and cheese. That was her thing, you know? And so there's just this idea that it's the dogma almost actually it can be detrimental at a point in the beginning, you know, with a lot of, like, you know, the more disciplinary practices like martial arts, for example, or athletics. Having some structure and rigidity is not a bad thing, especially in the beginning, to build a strong framework. But eventually, as competence comes, individuality of expression allows you through the intuition to come to that place of knowing what and when. And so that was just so fascinating to me, that there was more going on here than just protein, carbs, and fats. And this is like really very easy stuff. Like you can go read the Blue Zones Project book. There's one called The Blue Zones Solution 2. The author's Dan Buettner, I believe. Really incredibly done book that's just, because it's simple. It's guys, let's stop focusing on the contrast, like Egwin was saying, of that's bad and this is good and I'm in this camp and this is the right camp. But especially what you become aware of as a coach, and what's something that as a younger trainer you get like, well, no, this is my way and I'm smart. I know this is the right way. And well, you're just not doing it. And so, well, it's your fault. And you get older and wiser and realize that it's on you at the end of the day as a practitioner. Like, it's your responsibility to educate that person and help them. But you have to come from a point of unity and compassion. And I would have clients and like, you know, that just, it didn't work for them. Like I had a great client, I had a great example. I had a client, she was in her 40s, she was an engineer and a strong woman, very physically driven, yang dominant, wanted to work out, strength train and all this. And she wanted to eat healthy. She was overweight. She had, you know, other things going on, definitely, you know, but if she ate red meat, it would just mess her up. Her stomach would hurt super bad. And it just like, she just comes to my mind right now, but there's certain clients that I've had, after you train enough people, you realize that not everybody responds the same way. And so if you as a practitioner are trying to force your beliefs on someone, that you're putting them in pain and discomfort. And she tried to do red meat and we talked about it. She got it down to just like a 2 ounce, and it just wasn't digesting. Whatever the issue was is irrelevant. If I can't get her out of pain in that moment, or at least alleviate that pain to some degree, let alone make it worse, then I'm not doing my job, then that's on me. And, a Hippocratic oath, which I take very seriously, even though I'm not a trained medical doctor, is do no harm, and even in the strength and conditioning field, that's the number one rule. Even as when I was training athletes, just physical athletic training outside of nutrition, if that athlete gets injured, they can't show up and train. It doesn't matter how good that athlete is. If they're not in the gym, or how good the coach is, it doesn't matter. They can't train. And so it's the same idea with all things, is if you're not benefiting them, then you need to re-strategize. You need to find a different approach. And so this was all happening around the same time, where I'm like, there's more to this nutrition game. These things aren't working for certain clients. And then you have the moral obligations of other clients who are like, I'm not going to eat meat, man. Sorry, I'm just not going to do it. That's not my thing. And previous again, I was like, well, sucks for you, because you're going to be unhealthy the rest of your life. And regardless of if that's true or not, the point is, I need to do a better job at being there and seeing that person. And that's compassion, seeing that person and realizing that they're not me. And that's fine. They don't have to be me. And in fact, I want them more to be them than me. So trying to find a way to fit me to them instead of try to make them fit to me has been a learning game. And that's really the art of coaching in general, which you know very well. You got to meet that person where they are. And so especially with nutrition, because it's even more daunting and even more foreign than exercise, it's even harder for a lot of people to come to a point where they feel comfortable enough to actually start to try to change. And especially when the culture out there, like all things, you guys got to realize, if you're buying it in a store, that means somebody is trying to sell it to you. That means they're trying to make money. They don't care if you get healthy or if you get sick from what you buy. They care if you give them money. They care if they meet the minimum quota of their stock shareholders that will, like if they go out of business or not. They're just meeting numbers on a piece of paper. You're a number to companies that sell you stuff, regardless of what it is. And everybody knows that at the end of the day. But cultural conditioning, psychology, which is my minor with the kinesiology. So that was the other side of it. I was like, man, you can go read any psychology 101 entry-level textbook and be like, damn, that's how they've been fooling people for centuries. It's just snake oil. If you show a fancy color, and evolution of the eye, right? Like bright colors, we evolved like, hey, that's food. We can eat that, And so bright colors on these labels, kids are attracted to them. Happy dancing, a happy meal, Coca-Cola, open happiness. Are you kidding me? And every kid is getting, the average kid sees 4,369 commercials every year, something like that. Classical conditioning, again, guys, you can open a book, Hebbian Law, like, oh yeah, you keep doing that, they're going to believe it for sure. Tell a lie 1,000 times, it becomes the truth. And we all know this, but it's just such a disconnect from food, which is really a disconnect from nature. And that is it, such a powerful intuitive connection that you can make when you come back to food, which is why I love Catherine McConkie so much. She'll hold a potato and be like, just feel the potato. You're like, like people just be like, I don't even know what to do with this. But the potatoes, like, I got potatoes growing in my garden, guys. It's like fascinating, when you start to reconnect to nature and realize that the intelligence of real food grown from the earth is what is bringing you into balance and harmony to help your body heal itself. But of course, again, we've been disconnected and we never learned any of this information. So when I started eating healthy food and losing all this weight, it wasn't because I was calculating my macronutrients and I was getting 32% of carb. No, it's because I just stopped eating food that was killing me and I started eating food that was healing me. And to go back, I love this. I heard this recently from Greg Braden and a friend of Bruce Lipton's, who they're going to be out here on Maui this October. I'm trying to go see them along with Joe Dispenza. And Greg Braden quoted Jesus in an interview. It was on London Real, actually, LOL. And he said, when they asked him nutrition advice, he said, I just follow the simple words of Jesus. If you eat if you eat dying foods, you're going to die. If you eat living foods, you're going to live, in that sense of just like, again, simple, guys. And that's why I love the beauty of JERF, because with the Blue Zones Project, with the individuality of everyone, and with a mass amount of other shit we already got going on in our life, we don't need to make things more complex. We need to simplify the process. Just eat food. Just eat real food. And that's my diet, JERF. Just eat real food. And I look at it like the food pyramid. The base of the pyramid, and this is classic again, like, let me get that snake oil bottle of supplements, this pill in the bottle held by this guy on steroids. Well, I want to look like that. And I mean, he's holding that. So duh, that means I'm obviously going to look like that if I take that supplement, you know, and we know that that's not true, but it's a shiny red bottle and he's so jacked and I just want to be jacked. And so you believe into it and you fall for that outside of the self. And so you'll see this all the time in like bodybuilding forums, and guys especially will be like, oh, well, I thought it was better to eat 30 grams of protein instead of 35, because 35, you're just going to poop it out. You can't absorb more than 30 grams of protein at one time, because this one study that wasn't even done well, I'm actually referring to a certain study that wasn't even, irrelevant study, but people will latch on to like, oh, no, this, I'm over here and this is right and you're wrong. And it's like, okay, let's slow down. There's probably a little bit more to this. And again, going back to that comment that guy made today, I said, we have come a long way in our science, and there's a lot that we do know, but there is exponentially more that we do not know. And so who am I to be like, yeah, I'm right and you're wrong, stupid, you know? Like, what do I know at the end of the day? And that's the beauty of science. It's always refuting itself. It's always the goal of science is to disprove itself. So to get stuck in one idea, you lose the compassion to see someone else in their journey, but also it becomes rigid and dogmatic and takes away the enjoyment of it, because you're always seeking that next thing. Well, that supplement and then that supplement. Well, yeah. Nutrient timing and these little things that are like the 2% at the top of the pyramid. Like, you shouldn't even take a supplement if you're not first eating real food. Like, if you drink soda, you don't even have a conversation about supplements. Like, you need to stop. You need to plug the holes in the boat that are causing you to drown. And those are the most important things, is that base of the pyramid. Like, let's just get real food in. Then we can have the conversation about how much. And then that's really if you're eating real food and you're not eating junk, then your body's not in this deprived state of scarcity. Oh, I haven't gotten vitamin K in 2 weeks. Like, and so you think you're hungry, but it's actually your body trying to get nutrients. And then you stuff yourself with calories void of nutrients, and it doesn't actually fill you up, and it just makes you feel more sick. And I saw a really interesting article on this, that they spent something like $30,000 designing a candy bar to make you hungrier after you eat it. And they do so by pumping it full of sugar, salt, and fat. Those three things are very palatable, very addictive, and they don't really give you much return on investment, especially for long-term energy, nutrient density.
There is just on a quick side note, for those of you who want to dive more into food technology, literally. I mean, it's progressed so much even in the last couple of years. This book is already a couple of years old. Book from Joanna Blivman, Swallow This.
I've heard her name. I haven't heard her research.
Incredible. Read this book. That's amazing. Like, she went undercover in the food industry for a couple of years and then wrote a book about how they do things exactly like the power bar that you just described. And it's incredible. I'm gonna put links to a couple of the books that we've been talking about in the description down below afterwards. It's incredible. Yeah. And it's a big issue. It's really a big issue. The idea of implementing a purely modern scientific approach in something as integral as nutrition. Because that's the thing that I see when it comes to science nowadays. Science has become way too deductive.
Mm-hmm.
Deductivity is extremely important to grow in science, but if you do not zoom back out again and you do not take what information you gained from your precise deductive perception and put it in relation to the whole working principle of a human body, of life itself anymore, then things emerge exactly like what you said about supplements. That's the point. According to this study, cells work best if they have X amount of vitamin, I don't know. And that's incredible awesome on one side and incredibly dumb on the other side, because it does not take into account where does this person live, what emotional state is this person in, how much is this person's gut even capable of processing and actually taking on those nutrients. Like what's the energy output of that specific person? How much is this person working with the body, with the mind, energetically, whatever it might be? All of those things have to be taken into account. And so, yeah, you can create guidelines, but you cannot, with more deductivity, you understand a process, but that process then has to be observed in a greater perspective. Otherwise, it's absolutely useless. Yeah. It's the same thing. Sorry that I jump a little bit out of what our conversation was intended today, but it's the same thing with things like studies about cell phone radiation.
Yep.
The one thing that everyone is focused on right now is whether or not that cell phone radiation is an ionizing radiation. Okay, we know that ionizing radiation is harmful to the body. So that is what most studies are focusing on. And the funny thing is, we know that there is a lot more to electromagnetic radiation and how it affects the body than just the ionization part. But that's the only thing that's talked about in the mainstream media. And it's such an incredible aspect. Again, we now know, okay, well, cell phone radiation, 2G, 3G, 4G, heats up certain areas in the body and is most likely, like with a really almost certainty, it is responsible for creating certain types of brain tumors and stuff like that. We know that. Even officials touch on to that by now. All right, now they talk about 5G and the implementation of this new technology. They say, well, it's not even strong enough to actually penetrate the skin and stuff like that, not mentioning that the way it is measured, it's measured when the antenna is in neutral and not focusing on the device and stuff like that. But even more interesting than that, there are things like, we know from research from Bruce Lipton and other great scientists that the governing proteins in our body that partially depend on the nutrients that we get in through food, but that those proteins, they're dipole molecules and they react 100 times more to electromagnetic than to chemical impulses. Now, there is a phenomenon that's called protein folding, which means that the dipole molecule, a protein in this specific case, completely folds up and stays in this totally folded state, partially disabling its ability to do its work on a cell properly. But the funny thing is, protein folding is an extreme case. Literally, every single type of electromagnetic influence on a protein starts to reshape this dipole molecule according to the electromagnetic field that it is exposed to. This is also why the heart and the heart rate variability are such a governing aspect in the body, and this coherence of all bodily functions with our heart and with the electromagnetic field of the heart is so central, because the heart, the electromagnetic field of the heart, governs the proteins, which again are the governing factor for gene expression. And so the funny thing is, they say, well, if we take a cell out and if we take proteins out in a petri dish and we use cell phone radiation, and they have done studies like that, then we cannot prove that full protein folding happens. Now, my thing is, okay, awesome. That's a very deductive point of view of you take a cell, you take a governing protein, you expose it to cell phone radiation, and you realize this cell phone radiation might not be at a certain frequency, might not be strong enough or the right frequency to fold the protein completely. And in this specific case, it seems like it does not change genetic expression significantly. But then putting this deductive point of view into a greater concept would be, okay, and now let's try and study it if there is a governing influence of the heart's electromagnetic field that is specific to that cell and that protein. How much does the external electromagnetic field actually influence the governing element of the electromagnetic field from the heart? This is something you do not study once you take that cell out and put it in a petri dish. So the study has to change. And on top of that, the funny thing is, for those of you guys who are not sure if I'm like completely out in conspiracy theories or something like that right now, no, I'm not. Actually, you can look it up. Microwave radiation, also in the frequency bandwidths that are used now for 5G and stuff like that, there are patents out there to use microwave radiation for protein folding and for protein and genetic expression influences in nutritional science. There are patents in the US and in China where they use microwave radiation to change the protein and genetic expression of certain fruits and vegetables before they are transported across the globe, to change the way they decompose and to change the nutritional values of foods. That's technology that emerged in the last couple of years, and it's out there. You don't have to do something fancy. You can do a Google research and you find peer-reviewed studies that prove that. Now, the funny thing is, like I said before, I love science, but the problem with science nowadays emerges where science becomes too deductive and does not put whatever findings they make back into a greater context of the living thing itself. And now I give it back to you, John, because I think that's exactly what you are saying as well. This whole JERF concept, this baseline of the pyramid that you're talking about, just eat real food, like get all those elements out that would normally create, like you said, holes in the boat. And it's exactly that. You can know science very precisely. You can know how many vitamins your body needs or whatever, but there is a baseline to all of this. And that baseline has to do with feed the body with something it recognizes out of its evolution as being food, and not just with some designed element that just out of a study you assume is something the body might need. Okay.
No, that's
back to you.
So much there to unpack. That's so good. And what a great example of epigenetics right there is that environmental influence, especially on the whole. And, you know, I don't want to go off topic on this because, you know, like you said, guys, the information's there. The hard part is science is a language, which is its own, you know, mountain to climb for interpretation. If you haven't studied French, then you wouldn't expect to be able to understand French or speak French. And science is in that way, its own verbiage, its own context. And so a lot of people that aren't trained in that have a hard time understanding studies. And it's really easy to take one study and argue on both sides by cherry picking little pieces of the data. And this really takes it to the fact that science has to be funded. Who's doing the funding? And like, I can't remember who said this where I heard it originally, but there's no broccoli company out there doing broccoli research, you know, like, because nobody's going to profit on that. Like, oh, grow your own broccoli, you know? So when we look at these studies, and I mean, that's where, you know, ego and influence come into play. Like, you know, people don't want to be wrong at the end of the day. Like 30 years of your life, you study one concept, you think you're right. And then somebody proves a study and you're fucking wrong, man. Like, your whole life was, you know, wrong in that sense. That can be a very hard pill to swallow for some scientists, but also going back to the fact that money creates influence, and that influence can be used as a tool appropriate to the user. Guns don't kill people. People use tools, and their cause creates an effect. And so you could call it conspiracy theory or not, but if you know how to read the language, it's been on the wall the whole time. All you got to do is look. It's pretty obvious. And there's another big conversation going around right now outside of EMF related to immunology and the potential use of something outside of the self to get a quick temporary fix for this potential virus, whatever you want to call that. But it's the same kind of idea that these people are, the funding that's coming from the research isn't necessarily rock solid, faithful, got the best interest of humanity in mind. They got profits that they got to hit. They got shareholders that they got to appease. And so if they can word the study just right, it sounds pretty good on paper. And, you know, like even oncology has its own, you know, list of research that's like, ooh, yeah, it looks actually pretty not great as a choice on paper, but man, what a profitable industry. How booming is business for cancer? My goodness, you know? So there's so many topics there that you could get into and call it conspiracy or not. But I mean, again, science is a language and it is dictated by people with influence. And so when you see these studies, you have to be really careful and, you know, take it with a grain of salt, because if it's not, and that's, you know, the thing about science, the deductive view is disintegrated. It's not, nothing is separate from itself. And so it has to tie back into the whole. And I love the example of like a car. I've just always used that. My dad was a mechanic for a long time. And so I'm bored to death of cars. They do nothing for me. I have no interest in them, but I'm a mechanic for human bodies. I've always felt that same level of understanding, tinkering under the hood of the human organism. And if you take the alternator out of the car will run for a little bit, but eventually the battery will die because it's not being charged by the alternator. So, you know, in that sense, you need to understand what the alternator does. You need to take it out of the car, look at it and be like, oh, this is what charges the battery, but you need to put it back in the car and make it work as the whole machine would normally function in real life. And that's, you know, the difference between, you know, human trials and, you know, petri dish trials. But going back to the idea of like just keeping it simple, when, you know, paralysis by analysis can really occur in that sense where, well, I read this one study over here and then I read this one study over here. Take a step back, realize that those might be influenced potentially for the outcome of money, and that it likely still is only a very small part of the picture. And if we've been around for 500,000 years and we can see some correlations between this type of food we're eating more of and our health has this perfect match of an inverse relationship, like more sugar, less, you know, or whatever it is, whatever the more processed food, hydrogenated oils, right? This is a great example of this. This was in the, I want to say the 20s or the 30s, hydrogenated oils. They figured out that they could put more hydrogen into, I want to say saturated fat. If you put hydrogen in it, you can do a man-made process to hydrogenate saturated fat to turn it into trans-saturated fat. When the research came out on this back then, this is, you can go look this up. They were like, ooh, yeah, that's not going to be good for humans. That's a bad idea. We tried, and the people that funded the research said, like, shut the fuck up. We're going to make a lot of money off of that. Increases shelf life by 30 years. You know, there's all these other things that were influencing. And now we know, like trans-saturated, there's no question. Trans-saturated fat, trans fats. Everybody knows, like, trans fats. Margarine, I can't believe it's not butter in the 90s. Like, guys, it's like really, really close to PVC, pipe, plastic. Like, they're really close chemical compound, really similar. So we know those things now where we can look back. But they knew then, 80 years ago, they knew then, and they said, shut up, we're going to be rich. And so that alone should be a warning call. Things have not changed. They, like Egwin was saying, the food technology has evolved exponentially since then. They know, even, and now tied in with digital marketing, television, and, you know, like, you got the commercials of the doctors holding up cigarettes, kids holding pills. Like, it's not a new game, guys. Like, it's been there on the wall for a long time. So call it what you want, but it's money at the end of the day. But okay, let's take all that away, step to the side and go, okay, well, I know shit is hitting the fan and there's a lot of other shit. I don't want to believe anything. What should I do now? Well, this is the example I always use. Go back 150 years ago and ask your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents for some organic food. They'd look at you and go, what food? Organic? What does that mean? You mean the food in my backyard? The like food, right? Like just regular old food. And if we've evolved for 450,000 years and seemingly have done okay up until then, and then in the last 140 years since really the Industrial Revolution, when we've tried to go bigger, faster, stronger with everything, and then we're seeing this seemingly parallel correlation to a decrease in health, we have to start asking more questions. Like, who's doing this research? Who's giving us, who's force feeding us this information, or restricting us from other very logical, common sense information, like just fucking eat some food, like regular food, you know? And so that's the idea, is like, that's number one. And that, again, is not just like, yeah, eat some food, silly. Like, we know that logically, but to recondition the behavior patterns that are just saturated in the cultural bubble of how we're supposed to think, feel, and act as a cool person. You know, if you don't drink alcohol, if you don't, like, I literally had a client, and when he started eating healthy, he started taking salads to work, and his peers would laugh at him and make fun of him. You're eating a salad. Like, that's what we've come to, guys. We're laughing at other people for eating real food. Like, that is the laugh. But the beauty of it with epigenetics, again, is you've got those 2 cards in your hands, and the first 4 cards are bum, nothing. And then that 5th card lands and you win the hand, jackpot, right? It just turns the whole thing over. So that's the idea, that we're dynamic creatures. We're always changing. And even though you may be starting farther back in the race, like I definitely was, that doesn't mean that you can't catch back up. It's just time and effort, like anything else. It's just another skill that you can build. But I think what people don't realize, especially in the beginning, is how much environment influences behavior. And so one of the first things I do with my clients is, like, before we talk about adding anything, let's set up your environment by getting rid of those things. I like the analogy, I got this from Dr. Pedram Shojai. He says, 1, stop the bleeding. 2, patch the wound. First, get the bad things out, then start to encourage putting good things in. And in that process, taking the bad things out, the first thing you want to do is plug the biggest holes in your boat first, the ones that are causing the most harm. Like if you're doing cocaine, let's start there. That's a big one, you know? And then when you're putting good things in, lowest hanging fruit. Don't shoot for the moon. Just add 1 vegetable a day. Add 1 more glass of water a day, whatever it is. And I love the example. I use this all the time. I just was talking about this with one of my clients, because you have to give someone a foundation. There was a research study that was talking about behavior and adherence related to new habits. And they had 3 trial groups. One implemented 1 new habit for, I think, 21 days. And then the second group did 2, the third group did 3. And then they followed up, I want to say like 30, 60, 90 days later, something like that, and see who was still doing the habit, what stuck and what didn't. The group that added 1 habit, 95% success rate of adherence. The group that did 2, down to 30%. From 95 to 30, just from 1 habit to 2 habits. 3, they had 3% success rate. So it just goes to show, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time, just 1 step at a time is the journey of 1,000 miles. So you have to make it simple, and you have to have compassion for yourself, because at the end of the day, the ketogenic diet is great for some people. The vegan diet is great for some people. The carnivore diet is great for some people. And then in that context, those diets are good for some people for certain periods of time, which they call it the vegan dilemma, for example, where people start a vegan diet. Is very similar to my experience with the ketogenic diet. They just stop eating bullshit when they switch to vegan. And they think that it's the meat, but it's the processed meat. It's the processed sugar, these additives and these, I mean, guys, it's crazy the amount of ingredients of things that are just not organic in the sense of like living compounds, that is like our body's like, oh, I know what that is. And so if you stop putting those in your body, you're going to feel better for sure. It doesn't matter what diet you're on. You're on an elimination diet. At the end of the day, you're eliminating the stuff that's causing the holes in the boat. And the problem with that is people get stuck with that diet, and then they become religious and dogmatic about it. And they're like, oh, well, and they know it too. Dave Asprey has a good, I love you, Dave, but you're not my favorite as far as the delivery of your content. But I'm honest. He had this podcast where he was talking, and he was like, the people know, like, you're 2-3 months into the vegan diet, and it felt so good that you're like preaching to the rooftop to everybody, you need to go vegan, game changers. Have you watched the documentary? Oh, you're gonna die, you eat meat. And then 3 months go by, and they actually start to get sick again, because they've taken out the bad stuff, but they never put the good stuff back in, the nutrients that they need. And plants don't necessarily have the comprehensive gamut of nutrition that you need. And if you are just eating plants, it's usually harder to get those. You have to try a little harder. I'm not saying you can't be optimally healthy on a vegan diet. It's definitely possible, but it's seemingly a little bit harder, because you just have to be more aware.
Just one quick throw in at that point. When I said earlier that I was complete, like 100% vegetarian for about 3.5 years, right after that intense shift in my life, I was also a couple of weeks vegan in that time. And back then, I did not know how to sustain myself on a vegan diet without eating literally every 10 minutes.
Especially if you're training.
The amount of money I needed to sustain myself went up exponentially, and I ate all the time because I need a lot of energy. I move all day long, and I work cognitively a lot and physically. And so that requires a lot of energy. And in those first 2 weeks of vegan diet, for me personally, it did not work back then. Because back then I did not know how to cook my meals, my vegan meals, in a way that there is actually enough energy in there. I did not know how to use herbs. I did not know how to compose different aspects, different vegetables with each other in a way so that I get the necessary nutrient density. A couple of years later, I met people who were on a vegan diet their whole life, literally. And that was the first time when I experienced, oh, wow, like there is just as much energy in this vegan meal than if I were to eat meat. It's definitely possible, but it requires of you to know what you are doing. And sometimes it is a little bit more effort to prep a vegan meal to have the same energy content than if, say, you add some aspects like at least eggs or honey or stuff like that. It doesn't even have to be meat. And so, yeah, and then a little later on, one of my an ex-partner of mine, she's probably the best cook I ever met anywhere. Like, she was definitely cooking on a couple of star, like 2-3-star level. And yeah, she's also still cooking for yoga retreats and stuff like that, and doing so on a vegetarian and vegan basis. Extremely creative. And I've never had food with that much energy content in my whole life than the time that I spent with her, those 3.5 years that we were together or something like that. So I definitely know it's possible. And that's, I think that's like you said, it is possible, absolutely. But I made both experiences. I made the experience of not being able to sustain myself with a vegan diet, and I also made the experience of really thriving with it. But it has nothing to do with, oh, okay, I'm not eating certain things. No, it has to do with how you eat the things you eat and how you prepare them. And that's exactly what you were just saying. And I just added this out of my own experience again, just for the sake of the argument, because yeah, I can 100% attest to what you just said. It really comes down to what you do and how you do it.
To see both sides of the coin like that is such a great example, because the preparation and the funny thing is, a lot of those traditions, that knowledge was passed down through oral tradition, through culture. And we just have become so disconnected from culture and from nature that we've lost a lot of that. And then we go back to the fact that now we have vegan potato chips and vegan cheese puff balls and vegan, it's like, it's just like, you'll buy stuff now that says it's like gluten-free oats. Well, no shit, it's gluten-free oats. There's no gluten in oats, or like, it's just marketing. Like, they know that they're getting your ass with these little colorful labels and, oh, well, it's gluten-free, babe, and I'm not saying, don't experiment with eliminating gluten. For a lot of people, it's a really good idea. It's a good starting point. It's one of those big holes that can cause inflammation and intestinal permeability and on. But it's not about the label. It's not about the words around it. It's just getting in touch with nature, getting in touch with food as a living organism like yourself, and having what was built back up for me, which I didn't have, was a respect and an admiration for food. That it's something that, and like, why do you think all cultures throughout time said prayers before meals? Like, they took a moment to stop and pause and appreciate the food. They weren't doing it because they're like, well, this is lowering my cortisol level, and so I'm going to digest it. Like, that I think is something too that is really important, because you and I really see from that perspective of, yes, we do have a physical and mental and emotional and an energetic / spiritual body, however you want to use those words, but most people get stuck on the crude matter, the physical material body that we can see, because that's what our culture has been told to focus on. And the problem with that is it's that disintegrated approach where, and this is the story of my life, every time I have tried to force to get a physical outcome, I always it's like trying to shove a square peg into a round hole, and I just beat my head against the wall. And the second, it's like instantaneous now, especially when I shift my perspective of trying to get a physical outcome and just do it for the spiritual practice itself, to acknowledge and be aware and present that there is an interaction, the dance that's going on, the physical results come immediately. They are the aftermath, the icing on the cake. You see how I love food puns? There, you get that as a consequence for focusing on the right things. And it's oftentimes way easier, and you'll get the results faster. And this was for me in bodybuilding. I'm like, I got to count my calories, and I'm 193.2 and not 193.1. I need to do more cardio. And instead of just like, enjoying the process. And the same thing with like, just say a prayer and just thank you, food. Like, you'll get all the things that you want out of it, but you'll also grow this connection, this appreciation, and this relationship with the things that you're engaging with in your body. And I love the quote that your diet isn't the food that you put in your mouth. It's the people that you talk to, the thoughts that you think, the environment that you engage with. And that's epigenetics. Everything is your diet at the end of the day, which is not a diet, it's a lifestyle. And if you come at that lifestyle from a point of respect and connection and presence and gratitude and appreciation, then everything else kind of just naturally does its thing. A tree doesn't try to go fast. It just grows. And you don't put a seed in the ground and go, God dang it, where's my tree? You water it, and you know that it's going to grow at its own time. And when it bears fruit, and that's the beautiful thing about having a garden, man, is like it really forces you to become so much more aware. Like when I first started gardening, I wasn't as aware, it's like being a new parent and you like have those regrets that like, God, I wish I would have paid more attention, or like, geez, I really was mean to those, I overdid it. I emotionally reacted and I spanked them or something. Ooh, I probably shouldn't have done that. Geez, that was a reaction. Same thing. I'd be like, oh, I don't, I just didn't have the appreciation. Be like, oh, I'll water them tomorrow. I'll water them later today. And like, just like not appreciating the fact that they're living beings in that sense. And, like as small as it is like your plants are similar to your pets in that way, where it's like, if you're going to take on that responsibility, then you better hold yourself accountable to, the necessary prerequisites to foster that life, to shepherd that life. And when you come at it from that perspective, I don't even want to buy food buying food at the grocery store is like so dull now. It's empty. It's lifeless. It's really lifeless because I don't have the relationship with that food. I don't have that connection. I haven't fostered that meaning.
And I think emotionally and mentally, this exactly is the second most important thing that comes into nutrition. And maybe this is even the primary problem that we are facing right now, the disconnect and not having a relationship with food, like you just said it. Like, and how many people who are eating carrots have ever picked a carrot for themselves? How many people have ever caught a fish for themselves if they eat fish and stuff like that? And the relationship aspect, this mental and emotional relationship with food, recognizing that it's I'm stuffing something in there because it's a necessity, like this, that's a problem, because it shows how you approach life and how much value you give to your own life. If you dishonor and disvalue something that keeps you alive and that is essential for you to stay alive, then this also is a mindset of yourself that literally radiates out in every single thing that you do. Mm-hmm. And it shows that you're not really appreciating this experience right now. Mm-hmm. Like, what are you expecting in for that? Yeah, and that's a massive, massive problem. And on a very physical aspect, just consider this. If you eat conscious, I mean, I know you know this, I'm just telling to the audience, but if you eat conscious and you pay conscious attention to what you are doing there, then this also means that you are prepping your body to take on nutrients. That's actually the first layer of eating. It's like the preparation, and then it's the mindset with which you are eating. That primes the physical reaction of your gut to actually being able to take on food. Even before you put something in your mouth and your saliva starts to sort of inform your acid in your gut, in your stomach. Okay, look, I'm gonna send you down XYZ, so you better prepare the acid in this or that way, which is why we're supposed to eat slowly, quote unquote. But this mindset is a precursor even to that physiological reaction, but it has just as much physiological effects as well. And that's so extremely crucial and important to understand for people, the mindset of what you put in yourself, in your body, and in your life. Like you just said, it's not even just nutrition. That's our topic today, okay? But it's nutrition. It's the people you surround yourself with, their emotions you surround yourself with, and you're allowing your life, the living environment, the sleeping environment, all those things, that nutritious aspect. And movement is the same thing. Movement is nothing else than nutrition in a certain way.
100%.
All of those things, approaching those with, how you put it, the gratitude and this appreciation, this changes your whole perception of, wow, okay, I am alive. I am a living, growing, evolving creature, and not some dead meat that's dying a little more every single day. And that is so important. Like that's so crucial. And I think that is also where the enjoyment factor comes in so much of that you're talking about. I have a couple of good friends who really have nutritional problems because they have so many different allergies that they picked up over time through different reasons. Some of those allergies, they came through really environmental factors like chemical aspects. Some of those came from eating the wrong things. Some of those came from vaccination, whatever it might be. But like allergies and people who have certain types of incapacity of actually properly digesting food in a healthy way, they are all around us, and it's a growing problem. And I experience many of those people to sort of have to limit themselves more and more and more in what they can eat, like no gluten, no dairy products, no this, no that. And many of those who really have bad cases of allergies, like who can't eat nuts, who can't eat this, who can't eat that, they fall into the problem of, okay, now I'm limited to, just to say a number, say 35 different kinds of foods or vegetables or whatever that I can still eat. And so they get bored of eating, literally. And especially for people like that, it's extremely important to go out of their own way and find the enjoyment factor in eating again. Find new ways to prep your meals so that they come out of the mindset of simply, I eat to survive, but I can't eat the foods that I really want to eat. So I just eat and I just live somehow. And I mean, maybe you can touch on to that for a second here as well. What's your take? Because I'm sure you also have a lot of clients who have issues with allergies and stuff like that. And I mean, what you said before, this having fun eating and this enjoyment factor, I think that's extremely important to get in there and really experimenting with oneself to find out, okay, what is possible, what is not possible, and then taking it from there. And the fun thing is your JERF concept theory holds up, because that's the one thing that helps them from getting even more allergies or food poisoning problems, whatever. Yeah.
Sensitivities. Yeah, it's interesting too, because I just find something so interesting and fascinating outside of the nutrition subject, more on the mind, but people just get so attached to the stories other people tell them about themselves. Oh, well, this doctor told me that I'm just allergic to it forever. And it's like, well, your body's just compromised. If you were to fix your body, if you were to fix your immune system, you could probably eat that and be totally fine, at least in moderation. For some people, certain things, they're going to be off the table forever. And that may be a genetic thing, but it's usually likely over time, you really just cut a deep wound and that scar is always going to be there. And so you may have to avoid those things. But I'm a hedonist of the tongue, man. Like, I love the pleasure of food. And the funny thing is, again, with the mind, we've been conditioned through those. Nobody's advertising broccoli to you. You don't see a single broccoli commercial, but you see those 4,000 commercials on Snickers bars and Coca-Cola and McDonald's, and all the colors are so catered to get that dopamine response. And like the burger commercials of the Maxim Sports Illustrated girl, so they're firing all these pleasure centers to get you to, oh, I can't eat the foods I really want, like melted plastic. Gosh, I just have to eat this life-giving food that's going to make me feel really good. But mentally, I was there, guys. That's the thing, is like, again, connection and compassion. We have to bring it back to the whole and understand that everybody's on their journey. And at one point, at one time, I was that guy, probably a lot worse off than a lot of you guys. So just know that it's a time game and that the body will heal itself at least most of the way. And to just be appreciative of that fact that you can get those things back, or that you do, for a lot of the people out there, I wanted to bring this up. You're watching this on YouTube, likely on your smartphone. Wow. Just take a moment and say thank you, because there's a lot of people out there that don't have a choice about what food they're going to eat. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from. They have to eat not healthy food, not because they're too poor, because they literally will die if they do not eat that food. And so in that case, when people are like, oh, well, I can't buy organic, I have to buy conventional, I just won't eat vegetables at all. No, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Again, layers, start where you can, but just begin to slowly make more conscious decisions. And really, that is, with all things, the first step is awareness. Become aware, put your attention on what you want to improve, and then just start whacking the hammer and fail forward. You're going to fail often, so get used to it, dust off the dirt and keep going. And I still, I will say, I take that back. Since about 2018, 2019, I got a pretty good rope on it. Like, I just don't have that mental desire anymore. But it took me 5-6 years to recondition my brain. And within that process, I'd eat a 2-pound jar of peanut butter and then I literally did this one time. I swear to God, the funny story, Memorial Day in college. This was after I had lost all the weight, the ketogenic diet. I'm all ripped and feeling healthy. My buddy brings over a bunch of cannabis brownies, and I had like 3 of them. And I got so high that I ate an entire jar of Jif peanut butter, a 2-pound jar, along with like a whole lot of other stuff that I had. And then I was like so mad at myself. And like, I lost all that hard work. God, I just was so mad. And then a week later, I was like right back where I was, totally fine, you know, but like, you're going to have those slip ups. That's totally okay. And somebody that I recommend, just as, you know, kind of like, you know, giving you guys a resource to close with, is Michael Pollan is an incredible resource that I used, especially in my earlier days, because he's very simplistic. He's a journalist who went around, I think, for like 9 years, and his passion's food. He's got a series called Cooked, I believe, on Netflix or somewhere. If you Google it, you'll find it. And he's got a bunch of books on food, but he was a journalist interested in food, cooking, tradition, anthropology, the Blue Zones Project kind of stuff. And so he started going around and interviewing traditional cultures and scientists and finding out what's the scoop on this food thing. He's got some great books, one called The Omnivore's Dilemma, pretty popular. In Defense of Food is a really good one. That's actually the one that got me into it. And then he's got like a little pocket book called Food Rules. And it's like the little like cute quotes that you have on your desk for every day, the daily quote. It's like a little book like that. It's 52 different quotes, and they're all just cute little parables. Like this one got me, this because I grew up in a scarcity mindset where we didn't have dinner some nights. I had to go to a friend's house to eat sometimes, or just not eat, you know? And so you better finish your plate, boy. You know, you don't know if you're going to eat again. And so I was like that kid. I'd go over to the friend's house and they'd be like, geez, it looks like you haven't eaten in days. And, you know, then it becomes like this game, like, oh, if I act super hungry and eat more, they'll get more food, you know? And so I built this mindset that I have to be stuffed every time I eat. And this quote, just the simplicity of this quote, again, the little things that create the profound shifts, was don't eat until you're full, eat until you're not hungry. I just was like, oh my God, you know. And in there's a great parable in the Eastern tradition, 1/3 air, 1/3 water, 1/3 food in the stomach, or eat until you're 80% full, I think is an Ayurvedic one. So it's just that idea that, you know, these simple little oral traditions that have been passed down over time, that because of the separation and disconnection and segregation and deduction, we've lost the connection in all areas. And it's becoming very, very apparent in society, one people on one side, one people on the other, when it's just like these little things like, okay, vegan, carnivore, keto, elimination diet, you know what, there's so many, you know. And it's just like, hey guys, like, can we just get behind the fact that if we all stopped buying foods that came in plastic wrappers, the earth and the health of humanity would probably be a little bit better? Like, can we just get behind that fact? Like, if everyone, I love this example, vote with your dollar. I use the analogy, if everyone is at a restaurant and everybody at the same time stood up and said, hey, we're not going to eat here anymore unless you change the menu, what would that restaurant do? They would A, change the menu to fit the needs of the customers, or they would go out of business, right? Like, you're voting with your dollar every single time you buy that ice cream, every single time you buy that gluten-free vegan bag of chips. That's still a plastic wrapper that's not going to degrade. Like, that is contributing to this problem of separation, because we don't realize that the food that's grown out of earth is just like the cell on your skin. Like, the earth is its own organism, and the fruit that comes out are like the hairs that come out of your skin. And we've become so disconnected from that nature of where we came from, ashes to ashes, right? We came from the dust, and then hence the dust we will return. We've lost that fact that we are the earth. We are the cells on the earth. In this human monkey suit, we are intimately connected. We are walking trees in that sense. We're holobionts. We're walking ecosystems. And so we have to bring the awareness back to that fact that we are intimately connected to nature, which ultimately means we're intimately connected to food. And if we can just come back to the agreement of like, you guys can go eat your vegan food, that's totally fine, you know, morals, ethics, all that. So I'm not talking about any of that. It's a totally separate conversation. Can we just get behind the fact that we can just come together and start eating real food, that everyone, including the planet, will get a little bit healthier? And that's one step in the right direction. Then we can have a whole entirely new conversation based on new data, when everybody's thinking a little clearer and feeling a little bit better. And going back to Michael Pollan, the reason I love him is because of those simple steps. It doesn't have to be the crazy elimination diet and all that. Some people are there at far extremes, and they're going to need certain, special treatments. But for the most part, if everybody just, I love this idea of, like, if everybody's heard the quote, meditate for 10 minutes a day. And if you don't have time to meditate 10 minutes a day, meditate 60 minutes a day. Cook one meal a day. And if you don't have time to cook one meal a day, cook every meal. And Michael Pollan, though, I love the way he says this. He says, eat whatever you want. The sugar, the fat, the cream, the butter, whatever. Eat whatever you want, but make it yourself. And this, I wanted to tie back into something that we were talking about earlier, is the physiological preparation process. If you're a lean enough body fat percentage, I figured this out when I was on ketogenic diet and dropped down to 4% body fat. You're actually, when you're cooking your food, and this is a very common symptom if you have high levels of insulin sensitivity or low levels of insulin in your blood, I guess. If you're insulin sensitive, and especially if you're fasting, if you've in a fasted state, when you start cooking food, you'll start to vein out. Your veins will start to protrude because your body's like, it's like, oh, it's coming. It's like, hey guys, hi, fire up the engine, fire up, come on, get ready. He's about to bring it in, So your whole body is reacting to this process. And just imagine driving up to imagine being in traffic, first of all. Like, what a weird concept evolutionary wise for the human organism. Tigers, lions, oh no, that's just a car. Oh, honking horn, like, oh shit. And then you reach out of your car and put something next to you in a paper plastic bag, and you just, there's no preparation, there's no cognizance, no connection. It's just dead. Not only the food is dead, but the connection is dead. The awareness it's lifeless. And so going back to the simple quote, eat dying foods, expect to die. Eat living foods, expect to live, and it really is that simple. And then we get into the idea, which, I won't elaborate on this just for closing, but it's 2020, guys. There's Ninja blenders, there's crock pot instant pots, there's air fryers. We have the ability, refrigerators. Do you know how amazing running water is? Like, we have the ability to utilize technology to our benefit, even though we're busier and there's more going on. We also have the ability to synthesize and make things faster. Like, you can I have a 2-gallon Instant Pot. It takes me 10 minutes to fill that sucker up. I've got food for 5 days, and it took me 10 minutes. Like, people are like, oh, I don't have time to cook. Now, I understand that's a layer of strategy. Okay, you got to know what to put in there and what seasoning to make it taste good. But even that, at the end of the day, just try it out. Like, if you don't like it, cool, scratch that recipe, try another one. But people are so scared to even start somewhere. You got Google in your hand, like, you have a super quantum computer to tell you every answer you could ever ask it, and then YouTube to, watch someone else do it. So you have no excuse at the end of the day, especially if you have the privilege to be able to use this technology, if you have access to this technology, and there's layers to the game. But just start bringing awareness to the fact that food is just like you. And if you can become more in harmony with the process of cultivating the food, you're really becoming more in harmony with the process of cultivating yourself. You are the gardener and the garden. And using nature as that reflection to know oneself, to learn about oneself, is one of the most powerful and profound things that you can do, that will bring you back to a state of connection. And when you are connected and you are in harmony, you can have compassion. And that's what we need, guys. You can use food, you can use nature to bring you into a state of harmony and connection that will allow you to see and feel and meet others where they need to be met. And together we can all walk each other home.
Love those words. Yeah. Absolutely. It's beautiful. Beautifully said. And like you say, I mean, the meal prep discussion, I mean, that's a whole different story. Maybe we do a whole video really focusing down on that, because
great. It's got to be practical and simple. And, you know,
because I mean, in this video, we really went quite far, which was to be expected, and I love it. I absolutely love it. So yeah, and yeah, touching on to that, I can definitely say that prepping meals, that also played a major part in on my path and on changing my diet totally. And but yeah, we won't go into more detail about that, otherwise it's another 2 hours or something like that. So yeah, love it, absolutely awesome. So to wrap this all up, I think the main takeaway points of this, the core concept of JERF, of your JERF concept, is just eat real food. I mean, this is really extremely important. Get rid of as much processed food as humanly possible. And it is definitely possible. It is also possible even if you do not have your own garden. You mentioned technology. I have a couple of friends who now have grow pots that they have in their home.
Dope.
That allows them to harvest at least 2 or 3 times a month, at least enough food for 1 or 2 meals. Now, even something like this, and they don't cost a lot of money. You can even do it yourself. You can even build them yourself. If you want the experience of literally creating your own food, or at least part of it. But even if that's not for you right now, at the moment, we are still in a situation where every single person has the possibility to get food that is not pre-packaged, and then learn to prepare it. And I know that my former partner that I mentioned earlier, she's also teaching people how to prep things quickly. Like we're talking 10, 15 minutes and you have your meal for the day, or even the next 2 or 3 days. Exactly the same thing that you are saying as well. And that's my own experience as well. And that's, I think there are a couple of main things here. So first of all, reduce processed foods as much as possible, get into a better relationship with it, like you said, and then really focus on finding out what is good for you at a certain time. If for medical reasons, or because you are having some issues at the moment with being able to process food and stuff like that, if there are issues, then find someone who really knows their way around food, like for instance John, or some other people who can really work out a nutritional plan for you specifically that helps you to gain just enough balance in your gut, so that after that you can eat a more balanced diet again that is not dogmatic. And I mean, one of the most extreme cases of nutrition, one person, I met him at a Tai Chi camp more than 13 years ago, and he was having constant inflammation in his body. And literally the only diet that he found back then to balance his situation out, not to be constantly inflamed, was to eat avocados and dried fish. And he literally ate avocados and dried fish 3 times a day every single day, 7 times a week, 365 days a year. It was the only thing that kept him from suffering.
I could probably do that.
When it comes to nutrition, there is hardly anything out there that can't be done, or that is impossible. There is no such thing as impossible. Especially our gut and our ability to adjust to food. This is probably one of the most adaptable systems that we have in our body, which also translates to, it's probably one of the most of the systems that has the most capacity for healing itself. Mm-hmm. Changing your gut microbiome just simply from what you eat and stuff like that. If you focus on a specific diet, which is important from time to time, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Like John wouldn't be where he is if he hadn't gone through a specific diet at some point. The same goes for me. At some point, dogma and focus is important because it helps you to snap out of a bad habit. And it's the first step to gaining more. I think that's what you were saying, Sean, right?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And for people too, be patient and forgiving. It takes time and you're going to fail. Just don't stop trying. Know that this works. And yes, you will get better with the process. It will make more sense. It will become more intuitive. But just know that everybody has to start somewhere. It takes time. And the more effort you put into it, the better results you'll get.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I think let's leave it here for now.
That was great.
I'm gonna talk with John afterwards again, and I'm gonna try to reconstruct all the books that we mentioned and put some links to those in the description down below. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Thank you, John, for being here and for having taken out time of your day for this absolutely awesome conversation. I always love our talks, and yeah, it's always a pleasure. It's not just us giving something to you guys. It's also us constantly learning from each other, seeing a new perspective, hearing something in slightly different words, even though our points of view might seem quite aligned. There is always something new that I learned from John, and I hope vice versa as well. And so that's amazing. I'm so grateful for having you, brother. And yeah, thanks a lot for that. Also, guys, if you want to check out what John is doing, he's constantly doing online stuff. He has online retreats going on, and meditation retreats, yoga retreats, and nutritional aspects. He also always weaves that together. So I'll put a link to his stuff down below as well. Really check him out. It's absolutely amazing. And like you said, it's like you see, it's never just one perspective and one angle. It's always serving the full framework, the full spectrum of things. And I can definitely tell you that if there is a specific requirement, then and you feel maybe slightly overwhelmed by all the different things that we did right now, like, this guy is an absolute professional, and he knows, like he also said, like, it's important for a coach or a trainer or whatever you want to call a person who helps someone else. It's important for those to adapt to the needs of the client. And that's something that I think John is one of the best out there that you can find globally. And I'm in this field now for more than 20 years, and John also for a long time. I don't even know for how long, but a long time as well. So we both know a lot of people, and I can tell you this one is really, and awesome dude and a great teacher, trainer, coach, whatever you want to call it, companion on a way of development. I think that's what we see ourselves the most to be, a companion on a possible path for individuals. That's it.
We're no different. You know, at the end of the day, we're no different than anybody else. We're just humans. And
Exactly.
I love it. Don't walk behind me, walk beside me, guys. We're all walking together. And Egwin, I mean, coming from you, man, that warms my heart, man. Don't make me cry, bro. But I love you so much. I really appreciate all that you've done, that you continue to do, and the work that we'll do together.
Thanks a lot, John. Awesome. I hope to be able to hug you soon again. And do some more real life stuff as well.
Yep. Absolutely, bro.
Guys, thank you for watching. Have a beautiful time. If you have any questions, either here for Facebook or on my YouTube channel, leave them in the comment box down below. If you have specific questions to John, really just reach out to him directly, or I can forward any questions, whatever it might be. Have a beautiful time. Thanks for watching all. Thank you, John, for being here once again. And yeah, take care and have a beautiful day and a beautiful time. Thank you all, guys. Bye.